Hello, welcome to Scott's Odyssey. After the 7 Years' War and the 10 years leading up to the Revolutionary War, the settlers of this part of Pennsylvania and the Iroquois Indians rarely, if ever, got along with each other. The overwhelming hate continued with murders and missing people on both sides of the line. When the Revolutionary War started, the British commissioned the Indians to do their bidding and paid handsomely for the scalps of settlers not loyal to the crown. This is the site of the Phillips Rangers Massacre. See you in a minute. Welcome back. In 1773, William Phillips, a farmer and frontiersman from Frankstown Township, formerly part of Berry Township, along the Clover Creek just below Williamsburg, PA, had completed fortifying his homestead and opened it to help provide shelter to other local settlers in the Morrison's Cove area. Just 7 miles away on the other side of Tussey and Terrace Mountains, at the end of the Woodcock Valley, in the Yellow Creek Valley of Hopewell Township, a newer resident, Lieutenant Colonel of the Colonial Forces of Bedford County, John Piper, had been doing the same thing. By 1777, John Piper was now a colonel and had built a 2-story stone house in Hopewell to help with protecting the locals from the Indian attacks. This location became known as Fort Piper. In June 1780, Colonel John Piper commissioned William Phillips as a captain in the Bedford County militia. Shortly after his commission, Captain Phillips was given authorization to raise a company of militia whom would specifically be Rangers. During the Revolutionary War, Rangers were skilled frontiersmen who often performed elite attacks and were renowned for their Indian-like tactics to get the job done. They were called Rangers because they would range between one post and another, patrolling between frontier posts, looking for signs of Indians in order to provide early warnings of hostile intent. In essence, a Ranger was specialized light infantry. Captain Phillips' orders were to carry out a 2-month tour of duty to range the Morrison's Cove Valley in search of Indians and Tories. Tories, also called Royalist or Kingsmen, refers to those whom were not patriots of the American Revolution and were instead loyalists to the British Crown. Captain Phillips and his men sought validation that the local settlers, whom were both in a panic and leaving the area to go to the safer Cumberland County or Maryland, well, that there were not large numbers of Indians in the woods surrounding their farmsteads. By Friday, July 14, 1780, Captain Phillips had only succeeded in obtaining 10 men, beside himself and his 14-year-old son, Elijah. The Rangers were Captain William Phillips, Philip Skelly, Hugh Skelly, Richard Shirley, A. Skelly, Thomas Sanders, Philip Sanders, G. Morris, M. Davis, Thomas Gatrell, and Daniel Kelly. On Saturday, July 15, 1780, a group of settlers who went from the fort in Woodcock Valley to Shoup's Fort in Liberty Township near Saxton were worried they would be attacked by the Indian invaders. Of those whom remained at the fort in Woodcock Valley, a decision was made to have one person go into Morrison's Cove to request a company of the Bedford County Rangers to aid them in their defense. Joshua Davis was the one who made the trip. That morning, he found Captain Phillips, who agreed to bring his 10 Rangers to the Shoop's fort. Joshua Davis left before the Rangers to let the settlers in Shoop's fort know that help was coming. As Joshua crossed the DarkWeb Mountain, he was ambushed by a party of Indians. It was estimated to be 60 or more strong in numbers. It's not recorded now, but Joshua Davis was able to escape and get to the fort to warn the others. All members within Shoop's fort decided to leave the fort and head east to safety. According to the records, none of them returned home until late 1785. When the settlers prepared to leave Shoop's fort, Frederick Schechler headed north about 2 miles to warn the Heater family of the impending danger. While en route, Schechler found the son of Frederick Heater, John, dead and scalped. He gathered the rest of the Heater family, and they left the valley to join those leaving the fort. Captain Phillips' Rangers made their way through Morrison's Cove and found that most, if not all, of the farmsteads were left abandoned by the settlers. Not a single Indian was encountered. When Phillips' Rangers crossed the DarkWeb Mountain and arrived at the recently abandoned Frederick Heater's home, Captain Phillips and the Rangers decided to spend the night at the Heater house. While they were preparing breakfast on Sunday, July 16, 1780, one of the Skellies opened the front door to discover that the cabin was surrounded by Indians. The estimated number of Indians was 60, 2 of them white men dressed and painted as Indians. While trying to goad the Rangers out of the cabin with a shot here and there, Thomas Gatrell finally put his gun through one of the cabin loopholes and shot one of the Indians in the left shoulder. The battle ensued throughout the day. 2 Indians were killed, 2 were wounded, and the chief was shot in the cheek by Philip Skelly. None of the Rangers were even scratched. The Indians, knowing they were not going to be able to defeat the Rangers in this situation, decided it's time to set the cabin on fire. Although it did not take on the first attempts, and the Rangers were quick to put out the fires that did catch, the Rangers eventually ran out of water. The battle continued while the cabin burned around the Rangers, and finally, Captain Phillips called for a ceasefire and that he and the Rangers would surrender as long as they were not injured and were treated as prisoners. The Indians agreed. One of the Tories who was with the Indians acted as the liaison and gave the demand that the rifles and knives be surrendered and that they allow themselves to have their arms pinned and bound. The Rangers agreed to the terms. Captain Phillips and his son Elijah were separated out from the group and taken away by 5 or 6 Indians. The second group started out and at about a half a mile from the Heater homestead were lashed to trees. Multiple volleys of arrows were fired into their bodies, and they were scalped. On Monday, July 17, 1780, Colonel Piper received the news that Frederick Heater's house was reduced to ashes. Colonel Piper took 10 men to the location of the cabin to search the area. They found the men all dead and still tied to the trees. Colonel Piper had the men cut down and buried at the spot of their death roughly 18 inches below the soil. On August 6, 1780, Colonel Piper drafted a report to Joseph Reed, the President of the Supreme Executive Council of Pennsylvania, regarding an incident in which the Bedford County militia had been involved. The letter read, "Sir, your favor of the 3rd of June with the blank commissions have been duly received, since which we have been anxiously employed in raising our quota of Pennsylvania volunteers and at the same time defending our frontiers. But in our present shattered situation, a full company cannot be expected from this county when a member of our militia company are entirely broke up, and whole townships laid waste. So that the communication betwixt our upper and lower districts is entirely broke, and our apprehensions of immediate danger are not lessened, but greatly aggravated by a most alarming stroke. Captain Phillips, an experienced good woodsman, had engaged a company of rangers for the space of 2 months for the defense of our frontiers, was surprised at his post on Sunday the 16th July, when the captain with 11 of his company were all taken and killed. When I received the intelligence, which was the day following, I marched with only 10 men directly to the place where we found the house burnt to ashes, with sundry Indian tomahawks that had been lost in the action, but found no person killed at that place. But upon taking the Indian tracks, within about 1/2 a mile, we found 10 of Captain Phillips' company with their hands tied and murdered in the most cruel manner. This bold enterprise so alarmed the inhabitants that our whole frontiers were upon the point of giving way. But upon application to the Lieutenant of Cumberland County, he hath sent to our assistance 1 company of Pennsylvania volunteers, which with the volunteers raised in our own county, hath so encouraged the inhabitants that they seem determined to stand it a little longer. We hope our conduct will receive your approbation, and you'll please to approve it by sending your special order to our county commissioner to furnish these men with provisions and other necessities until such times as other provisions can be made for our defense. As it turns out, Captain William Phillips and his son were not murdered and ended up as prisoners of war to the British. Captain Phillips was taken to Detroit. Elijah was taken to Chickalackamoose Old Town on the Susquehanna River and then on to Quebec, Canada. They were both detained as British POWs until the end of the war in 1783. Captain William Phillips came back and resettled in the valley in 1785. Elijah returned shortly afterward. The locals treated the Phillips with absolute disdain and treated them as if they were traitors or as someone who had made a deal with the Indians. The Phillips relocated to Boone County, Kentucky in 1787 after his wife, Sophia, died. William Phillips was found in the 1830 U.S. Census as a resident of Greene County, Kentucky, as being 100 years of age. He had remarried and had a daughter named Sylvia. His exact year of death is not known. On April 16, 1926, this memorial was placed here at Fisher Summit to dedicate the Rangers who lost their lives here. On January 25, 1933, while performing some grading around the monument to preserve the terrain, human remains were found under a few tree bases, 18 inches beneath the surface, at about 10 feet from this actual monument. Only 7 people's remains were found. The remains were placed in a casket and interned with a bronze tablet marking their location. The tablet reads, "We rest, having died in line of duty on July 16th, 1780. I want to thank you all for coming on this particular Odyssey. This one was a little bit emotional with the story and the way that it ran. Let me know down in the comments what you liked and what you didn't like. Share me with your friends. Share me as much as you can. Give this video a like. In those comments, tell me what you like or didn't like. Most importantly, hit the little bell. That way you get a notification of the next episode. And that way you can continue to come along on Scott's Odyssey. Thanks. Until next time.
On our way to find a geocache. If he can find it. Can you find it? Can you find it?
Where be?
Where's it at? Where's it at? Let's go.
Where be? Get to it.
Can you read a map?
I don't have to. I got GPS.
Oh, okay. Then let's
We
do
already
this.
knew you can't read a map. Even when I circle things with big red circles and point arrows, you can't follow arrows. What do they look like? All right, hold on.
We're waiting. What direction? Indiana.
I don't know, but if you keep interrupting my signal with your phone. Right there.
Right where?
It's a box.